So now we've got 2 coats of flat latex paint on this table, and I've lightly sanded it with the mid-grade sandpaper by hand. And you can take your hair dryer, or I just blow all the excess sanding dust off. And then you want to take a 100% cotton wet rag. You can use a tacking cloth, but honestly, I never do. I just use a really lightly dampened cloth wrung out really tight, and just basically like wash it and make sure you get all that dust off. So we've got a real clean, smooth surface right now that looks like it's a little bit older and beat up, and now we're going to make it really look like an antique piece of furniture. And the way we're going to do that is, I always like to wear disposable latex gloves because this stain it will not make your manicure look pretty, let's just say that. And it doesn't wash off very well, so it'll stain your hands. So I highly recommend you getting some latex gloves. You can get them at your Home Depot, Lowe's, anywhere like that, hardware store, a box of 100. Then grab some old t-shirts. Whoever in the family is done with certain ones or outgrown them and they got stains on them, 100% cotton t-shirts work the best. And I'm going to go, on this project I'm using a dark walnut stain. It is an oil-based stain, but it's okay that it goes over our latex, and then we're going to go back to water-based, and that does work just fine, so don't panic on that. And things, I'm breaking the rule and using a screwdriver to open it because I can't find my paint can opener. So, not a big rule to break. And this is my old t-shirt. Obviously I've used before to stain with. I've just let it air dry out outside where the fumes could go off into the atmosphere. You're just going to dip your t-shirt in there and get it kind of wet, and just basically, you do not need to be careful. You're just going to start washing it, and it looks really dark and things. Just going to kind of wash it all around. It kind of puddles up in some areas, and that's totally fine. You want the t-shirt a little bit saturated so that it pushes up into the creases and gets into all the spots. So after I've done a little bit of an area, I'll take a clean, dry rag t-shirt and just wipe it back off. So that's all you're going to do. You're just going to soak up that excess and wipe it back off. You can do this a couple coats if you want it a little darker. I end up usually doing a couple just because I overlap it and it kind of fades into it. And like I said, you don't have to be overly careful or anything. Just dip your rag in, and in these smaller spots where there's grooves and creases to get into, you just want to kind of shove the rag right on into it. One thing, as you saw me do there, grabbing it, it's not something you should do. You should kind of watch that, because as it gets on the gloves, it kind of can put a pattern onto the stain that you don't want to have. It's not the end of the world, but you just kind of want to be careful of that and watch it a little bit. So as you can see, it's darkening it up and giving it that antique look that we want. When you're working a big flat area like this, if you're doing a large table or just a smaller end table like I'm doing here, but there's one portion that's pretty big, it's a good idea to try to do the whole thing at one time. So saturate it with a bunch of stain and then pull it back off. Believe it or not, the legs and all the other things that seem a little bit more intricate are actually the simpler parts to do. So it's the next day now, and we got the staining part done that I was showing you. That's kind of the messiest part of the whole job. So not even my paint clothes, because today we're just going to clear coat it. So it's sat overnight. The stain kind of, it dries to the touch right away, but it's cured a little bit better by the next day. I've cheated and put my clear coat on the same day, but if I give you the best advice, it would be to give it a day. So the clear coat that I like to use the best is this polyacrylic, and my reason for that is it's water-based, and so my cleanup is a lot easier. The drying time is really fast, and it just seems to do a good job. This one is a clear satin. You can get it in gloss, semi-gloss, or satin, so it's just a preference choice. So this is the lowest sheen, but it still gives a nice finish to it. I don't usually go up to the gloss ones. They're not very forgiving, but semi-gloss are or the satin, both work really well. When you are clear coating, you want to be really careful, more so than even with paint, of barely using any at all. The idea is to put on about the thinnest coat you possibly can. And you're just going to start, you can't see where you've gone a little bit, so I work from the top down, or I work on this section, that section, but always just follow a pattern. And you're just going to brush it on as thin as you possibly can. And we'll give this probably 3 coats, and it'll be, by the time I'm finished doing it, it'll be dry back here, and you can start your next coat. I barely had any in my brush, and I'm still using the same brush. You'll get to a corner and it'll puddle just a tiny bit, and you just want to dab your bristles in there and get that out. On this section, I would start here to get a little bit more out of my brush on the straight section, and then when you're getting here, just barely just dab it in there and then brush it back. Just always watching for where it's puddling up a little bit, and just dab your brush back in. Another good thing to know when you're clear coating, there's something in it called Floetrol, which you can add to your paints to get the brush marks out, or your roller marks and things. And the clear coat already has some of that in it, so you want to really be sure that you don't brush back over where you've already applied some, because it starts to dry so quickly, especially the water-based type, that you want it to just go on super thin, and then it will naturally just spread itself with the Floetrol, and then just let it dry. Now if you see you've got a little puddle in a corner or something, just pull it back out. I'm Karen Seymour, and I hope that you're inspired to give it a try. Don't give up in the middle when it's looking pretty cruddy. Just keep going. And the main tips I can give you are light on your brush, not a lot of paint or clear coat in it, and just keep going. Don't be afraid to mess it up. It's supposed to look a little bit antiqued and old, and you'll end up with a great new repurposed table, or whatever it is you decide to do. I hope you enjoyed the tips and trips.